Party's not a party's a man who fights crime, and we're gonna watch him fight for a minute at a time with John and Niall and a guest who doesn't rhyme. It's Bat Minute!
Greetings, citizens of Gotham. Welcome back to Bat Minute and Robin, the show that isn't good at rejection, so please don't push us. We are really. We're lovely. I am your host, John Parker.
It's like, John, you haven't seen me read a bad review. It's like, I'm afraid you'll have to die. But yes, it's me, Niall. Oh my God.
And my tip, Niall, is never read the reviews or the comments.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I never do.
No.
Like, that's I never even look at the downloads because I'm just like, if I start looking at them, if I know the numbers, I know I'll become obsessed with them. So I'm just editing in the dark. I don't know. I'm sending finish the job, send it off, and it's like, let's hope that someone's listening to this.
I will assure you that they are.
Okay.
But I also stopped looking at the exact numbers because of the same reason. Where you're like, oh, today we got one less. What's wrong?
It's like some lousy turncoat out there.
Yeah.
The hell with you.
But we are joined once again by our very special guest. It is Mitch Brian.
Thank you again for having me.
Hey,
more than welcome.
Back. And this is minute 21. The minute starts with a psycho or two, and it ends with a maniac or many.
The modern day thinking to her first saying like, you psycho. My mind did go to the end of the movie with Batman going like, well, Batgirl, that's not very PC. What about that woman? But like, psycho, that's not very PC.
Well, especially to me, I work in a mental health hospital. That is definitely not PC.
It also seems too, it's like there is, and now thanks to the Harley Quinn animated show, the DC villain Dr. Psycho is also associated with Poison Ivy. So I was like, this would have been a good setup for him to be like, you psycho, and he's like, yes, from this day forward, I will be Dr. Psycho.
No, she should have said you psycho, and he goes, that's Dr. Psycho to you.
Yeah.
But I thought we started with chemistry. I thought that was the first word. I must have missed it.
Oh, no, yeah, we did come in, I think,
I just
high school. And yeah,
but that didn't make the joke. But no, yeah.
I'm just being a stickler for it. I think chemistry I'm just sad that it just cuts against the insult. She was off her game with that.
So
yeah, like, only Uma Thurman knew to time this just a split second later. Or
it's all her fault.
Yeah.
They should have known. So is it funnier with the chemistry line as part of the insult, or is it funnier where it's just you couldn't teach high school?
It's probably funnier with chemistry, but it's more cutting if it was just high school.
Like you couldn't teach anything.
I for a minute thought she was going to say, you couldn't get a job selling shoes at Barney's, which used to be an insult in Hollywood.
Yeah. That's weird, though, because apparently George Clooney used to sell women's shoes before he was, like, George Clooney. So maybe he would... It could have been that line. He's like, I want that cut out. It's like, I refuse to be in a film
I
that
guess
has
that's
that.
true.
I was going to say, why women's shoes? And then it dawned on me. It's like, well, if you want women to buy shoes, get George Clooney to sell them to.
Yeah.
It's always I just remember, like, Al Bundy in Married with Children, where they just seem to portray being a woman's shoe salesman is like the lowest rung you could possibly be on and stuff. But
well, I think back then as well, you have to think about it in the context. They're trying to say, look how emasculating it is. He's selling women's shoes. He doesn't even know about them. He doesn't wear them. Whereas now we're like, well, who cares? So what?
I was thinking nowadays, like, you need to be a good salesman, though. If you are a good woman's shoe salesman, you could make a goddamn bundle, like, if you know what you're talking about. But anywho, from shoes to psychos.
Yeah, she is ranting and raving at Woodrue for being a psycho. And he looks genuinely hurt, I think. Like it's not acted on the part of the character. I think he's like, I thought we actually were going to have a thing here.
Yeah. It really strikes me as like in an age now where you get a lot of a lot of people have been called out online for this, that, and the other, and you always get that sort of like, I'm sorry you feel that way response, that sort of thing of like someone trying to portray themselves as being good, but when they're clearly in the wrong. So this whole thing of like, oh well, I can respect your opinion, but I'm sorry, sadly I'm not good at rejection. It really strikes me as the nice guy response to her having to, everything she's saying is 100% correct.
Yeah.
Where he's just like, well, again, he might as well just be saying, oh, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, Pamela, but.
It's like, I hear you.
To play devil's advocate for myself.
Yeah. Now, as well, you said his line there now. He goes, well, I can respect your opinion. Sadly, I'm not good at rejection. I'm afraid you'll have to die. Now, great line. Amazing. The delivery, the scariness, the comedy, everything is perfect. But in the draft script, this is one of the only differences this week. Because, I normally rant about the draft all the time. It's mostly been the same.
Not if you rant about it. It's like you pacing back and forth.
Yeah, well, I do. I comb over that draft now.
This one changed word, it just ruins the whole movie.
I think the draft ruins this. Because in the draft, he starts attacking her in between each part of that line. He goes, well, I can respect your opinion, and he shoves her. And then the next part, sadly, I'm not good at rejection. He attacks her again in between each bit. Whereas I think that's not as good, as interesting, as scary, or as funny. I think it's scarier for him to then just go at the end, I'm afraid you'll have to die. It's like, whoa, where'd that come from? Jesus.
So when you're saying he attacks her, are these like the stage directions in between the lines?
Yes.
So it's one big speech that has like 2 or 3 stage directions built into the middle of it,
yeah,
right?
it's exactly the same. Yeah. It's just in a different sort of structure. Yeah, because it's sadly
that's a screenwriter trying to direct the movie.
Yeah.
And that's not what you do. And there are all those stories. There are so many actors who are notorious for when they get the script, the first thing they do is they go in and they cross out all of the screen directions that are interrupting their dialogue.
I can understand why.
Yeah, totally.
You want to bring something to the character, like the way you're acting. Like you want to bring your own kind of stage directions. I know you've got basic ones you want to work with, but you decide when you're going to shove and things like this.
Yeah,
and there's a director there too.
Yeah, I'm the director.
and what we know about directors and screenwriters is the directors are probably crossing out the directions as well.
And I mean, on the page, I think it works good this way. If you're reading a book.
Right. Breaks up the speech.
And you don't get the big reveal of, oh, you're gonna die. It's different. Whereas when it's spoken aloud, I think it's got a completely different flow. So they've made a good change here.
Yeah,
and he pretty much just plants and says the whole speech. He's in one position, so there's no moving.
Yeah.
So it allows him to really wind up to that die, and it's amazing when he lands it. It's really, really fun.
It's so silly in the best way. It's great. I'm afraid you'll have to die.
He's like, John Glover's on fire in this movie generally, but like in this scene, with this minute in particular, just
I agree.
The poisons and toxins burn a grave for you.
Yeah, sell that one because okay.
he knows what movie he's in.
Yeah, for sure.
The thing is, though, this actually looking at this more closely, I can actually appreciate this more because for years I kind of thought like all they're doing here is sort of repeating the Max Schreck Selina Kyle dynamic from Batman Returns, and very specifically a scene where he shoves her out the window to her death. But it's quite telling. Joel Schumacher's actually flipped the positionings of in that movie, Selina was on the left, and this, Pamela Isley's on the right. And it's actually looking at it more closely, there is a distinct difference in the characters because Selina Kyle was at that stage of her life, very cowed and very subservient to Max Schreck. And she was, she got a little bit more of a backbone in the last moments where she's like, well, go ahead, bully me if it makes you feel big. But even then, she seemed like she was kind of cowering before him.
Yeah, that was a performance to try and maybe scare him off. Yeah.
Oh, I think at the time she was genuinely intimidated by him.
I mean from her part, like if she acts tougher, like maybe he'll back down.
Yeah. Whereas this is actually, to be fair to Pamela Isley and the writing of this movie, she's the exact opposite. I have a feeling she constantly calls out Jason Woodrue for his crap, and she is in no way cowering towards him. She is just like, when I'm through with you, you won't be able to get a job teaching high school chemistry, you psycho. It's almost like they're going to repeat the beats of Batman Returns, but like, no, they do have her presenting a different type of, like, she's not the oppressed. Well, she's oppressed in a manner of, like, she's had her will and her agency sort of bulldozed by an inconsiderate asshole, but she's not as afraid or sort of she does have her own agency beforehand, whereas Selena Kyle did seem much more. She was already half broken by the time Max Schreck shoved her out that window.
Yeah. There's that that Mike Nichols phrase where he would say that every time he'd get ready to direct a scene, it would have to either be a seduction, a negotiation, or a fight. And if it's not one of those things, he wouldn't know his way through it. And he'd have to figure out how it was going to be one or all of those things. And it's like she has no leverage. This is not a negotiation beyond him at the very beginning saying, we could work together. I mean, it's a fight, and she has no real leverage except just the sheer force of will. Yeah. Which is another reason I think it's so interesting to watch these two go at it, because they don't really have anything to play in terms of negotiations. They're kind of through with each other. So it's just sheer head-to-head violence between the two of them.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think for 1 second she entertains his suggestion. She's not like, maybe I could work with him. Like, that doesn't cross her mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything about Jason Woodrue seems abhorrent to... That's even like in the previous... minutes where she was talking about I wonder why Dr. Woodrue keeps coming in and stealing my venom formula. Like I can imagine every single time she's always like, you goddamn ass. Like she's never like not letting it go. She will always be complaining to him. He is just so obnoxious and so inconsiderate that he doesn't care.
And I get the impression we've talked about, especially last week, how sleazy he is, because in the draft script as well, he's like extra sleazy to her, isn't he? And I think he's probably been doing that since day one. And he won't stop.
I like to think that this version of Jason Woodrue is actually a dryad from another dimension, and he doesn't know how humans are supposed to mate. So he's like, "This is okay, right? Like usually I would do this through photosynthesis. So I guess our bodies are supposed to entwine in some way."
Yeah.
I was sort of surprised that Bane didn't follow him in, like that he wasn't going to use Bane as some kind of intimidation strategy.
Yeah.
But he just leaves Bane behind, and he just chases after her, and it's such a weird. It's really just about pushing her over. It's very strange.
My only
in
thinking
that
on that is maybe the reason he's sort of taken her out of the room is I think maybe he's scared. Oh, Bane's just going to kill her. Like, I maybe cannot control him. And if we play our cards right, she might join us.
I think there's a good chance that Bane's in the other room killing all those the representatives of the ununited.
Yeah, but I don't
nation.
think he cares about that. Like, because there'll be other psycho world leaders who will come around.
That might be why the phone bidder wins. He's just like, oh, guess what? You won. Like by not being here by default.
He goes back in, and all those guys are ripped to shreds, and then he picks up the phone. He's like, "Are you still there?"
Well, if you want him, Bane's coming your way.
You can't tell him that though, or he'll lower his offer.
Yeah.
You have to be clever.
But should say though, this element of Poison Ivy, I actually think it's an improvement on the comic book origins they gave her way back when. Because as mentioned briefly last week, first origin story of Poison Ivy was given in World's Finest 252. It was actually in a Wonder Woman story called A Poison of the Heart, written by Jerry Conway, who very, very famous comic writer, co-created The Punisher, Jason Todd, wrote the Death of Gwen Stacy, etc., etc. But yeah, within that, it has the story that Lillian Rose, as she was referred to in that story, constantly emphasizing that she's seduced by her professor of botany, someone called Marc Legrand.
Oh, that is a great name.
It's a bit condescending in the way it's written, though, because it constantly goes on about how naive she is. It's like the amount of Poison Ivy stories it emphasize that she's from Seattle. I don't know why that's such a thing, but it's like, she's one of those Seattle types. She wouldn't know what she's doing.
Oh right, okay. Because I mean, as an English person who has never been there, my understanding of Seattle isn't it kind of a bit kooky and like alternative.
I thought it was just like it's the Fraser city, so that's what it means to me.
I thought it was kind of similar-ish. They have like a mini rivalry with Portland, don't they?
Yeah. Do you know, Mitch, does Seattle have anything to do with flowers or botany in any way?
That was my guess, is that because it's so lush up there that there's ferns and flowers everywhere all year round. That would be my guess.
It rains a lot, so yeah, I suppose that would help.
It does. It rains a lot.
Yeah. But they have little captions here saying, like, her professor's name was Legrand, a slick young fellow from France.
Oh.
He was cool, aloof, handsome, and overpowering. Too overpowering for a naive young girl from the social stratosphere of Seattle. And basically what he does then is that he discovers ancient Egyptian herbs in a museum exhibit that he wants to synthesize so he can use them in modern medicine.
I like that.
And because they're pretty much engaged at this point, like Lillian Rose and Legrand. And he's just like, well, if I could just get that, kind of browbeating her basically into going, well, initially she's like, well, my parents can give us money. And he's like, no, I have my pride and all this sort of business. And eventually she's like, well, I could steal the herbs for you. And he's like, oh yeah, that's great. So she goes and steals these ancient Egyptian herbs. And because she's the only witness to their crime, he poisons her with the same herbs. And then, you know, obviously comes back, she's poison ivy, and resentments towards specifically all male kind. And, you know, affiliation with flowers and stuff. And then Neil Gaiman, of course, later on changes it to Jason Woodrue. And within that story, Pavan, we mentioned last week, that doesn't really go into too much what Jason Woodrue does. At one point, she just says, like, oh, those experiments that Jason did on me, you know, they killed me. They actually killed me, but I came back. So I think that's all where they're getting the ideas of this. Because with Batman, the animated series, Pamela Isley sort of shows up fully formed. You know, it's a bit of a mystery in the first episode she's in about what's happened to Harvey Dent. He's going out with this lovely young botanist, and he's been poisoned somehow. And then at the end of the episode, it's like, oh, it was poison ivy the whole time. So I don't think the show ever gives an explanation as to why she is the way she is. It's just sort of alluded to that, you know.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you're right.
Yeah. But I do I like this version more, though, where she is more, no matter the fact she's standing her ground, she's very confident, she's very established in her own right. She's a full-blown doctor working for Wayne Enterprises and whatnot. And then her getting killed by this asshat. I prefer that over, like, her being a naive young girl from Seattle.
We've seen that before.
Yes. It just feels a bit condescending these days too, to be like, oh yeah, she's just like she was a stupid girl. She didn't know what was going until this, you know, she was taken advantage of and stuff.
Yeah.
It feels a bit insulting nowadays, but so yeah, I will give that to Kiva Goldsman and Joel Schumacher for turning around. It's like, no, she's a well-established woman.
I like that, and I like that you do keep saying how she's, you know, strong, because it would have been easy, and I think a lot of people do assume it's written with her being, oh, she's weak and timid, and then she turns to poison ivy and becomes strong and powerful with her femininity. It's like, no, she's quite strong anyway. It just amps her up.
Yeah. But yeah, so then we got, you know, I'm afraid you'll have to die. And I have to say that fall over the table, that does look like that'd be murder on your back. Like that's like Homer Simpson landing on the fire hydrant. Just like the base of the spine. It's like, oh my God, it's so painful looking.
Well, you've got to give her a bad fall, because just getting pushed over into the little sort of flower pit she falls into, that wouldn't do anything. She could just get up normally, you know. So it's like, well, we have to make it a really bad kind of fall.
And you have to add snakes.
You have to.
Yes.
You have to. I love that she gets covered in snakes. It's like, it looks like Jake the Snake Roberts, the wrestler's been here with his snake Damien. He used to beat people and throw the snake on them for no reason whatsoever.
But also you're getting, you know, the venomous side, but then it's also like Snake's classic, like, phallic imagery.
Yeah.
So she's been beat down into the dirt by phallic imagery again. You know, you can interpret that any which way you want, I suppose.
So are we to assume there's some kind of acid in there that's burning the hole in, or how is that hole happening? That she falls into,
question,
that she's sinking into.
Because he does tip over another thing with all the chemicals on, and I think there's some venom on it. But why would that cause a hole?
Right. Let the poisons and toxins, that's his line, you know, but he doesn't say, I mean, he says, let them, sink you into some place or something like that?
Burn a grave for you.
Burn a grave for you, right? Yeah. And so I guess that's the dialogue working overtime. So, you know, that's the other thing I'll say for this movie, for better or for worse. The dialogue does what dialogue is supposed to do in movies. It sets up the action, it comments on the action, but it is not the action. Yeah. The action is the action.
And it tells us what's actually happening, because otherwise we'd be like, huh? What? Why is it sinking?
Right, yeah.
I love that he's a little surprised, too, because the way he's looking, he's a bit stunned that it's happening. He's like, oh, yes, yes, let the poisons. And he's like, oh, how appropriate and ironic that they burn the deliver you to the
it up as
earth.
he goes along.
Yeah. I love that because it has just occurred to him, hasn't it? Like, oh, this is wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, and it's delivering you back to the earth you love so much. Oh, this is perfect. This is the best death you could have possibly had. But I also love the fact for that second tip over, like we don't see it happen, but it comes from the other side, so he would have had to do like a little jog around her to get to push over the other thing.
Yeah, the second tip over is right, and we've got a couple of tip overs of shelves in both rooms, right?
Yeah. It's like, God, so much broken glass, like And Wayne Enterprises cut the funding. Like they'll never get to replace all that stuff. All those beakers just wasted.
That's a good point. Does he still need that for his work on Venom, or has he got it down to a T now? He doesn't need any of this. It's done and dusted.
Just sell those Tesla coils.
Sell up, move.
That's why maybe he has to take the lowest bid. He's just like, I just need any money now to replace all this equipment. I do love, and this is classic monster movie stuff though, the snakes on the face thing. There's something, and I kept thinking, weirdly enough, of one of the Alien movies. This like the strobe light effect and the snakes across her face. And I was like, there can't be a shot in any of the Alien movies where there's a snake going across Sigourney Weaver's face. That's just not possible. But I keep having an image of specifically a sweat-drenched Sigourney Weaver with like a snake going across her.
Are you thinking of the face hugger?
No, I don't think it's that. I think it must be a completely different movie or something. But
I can't think of where she would have a snake going over her face in another movie either. Huh.
Do you remember this was the thing that happened in the UK last year, Mitch, during everyone getting used to wearing face masks? And there was some guy in Manchester wore a live snake around his face as a mask.
Oh, wow.
On the bus.
I didn't see this.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. I remember that was like a viral news story where it was just like, I guess he owned the snake, but he's just like, it's over my nose and mouth, so... And everyone, of course, in the bus was freaking out because there's a giant snake wrapped around the guy.
Snakes aren't as bad. Yeah, people think they're bad. They're not. My friend at work, she's got loads of snakes, and she wraps them around her all the time. Like she's got quite little ones though, like corn snakes and stuff. She'll put around her when she's doing the dishes because they just like to sort of chill out on you.
I like to think this was inspiring to Britney Spears for that.
That big python.
Yeah,
wasn't it like a white and yellow? I've held a python that was like, I don't know, it was big. I'm tempted to say like 15 feet, but that might be a lie. It was big. It was a big python. But
Nastasia Kinski and Richard Avedon got there first. You remember the nude of Nastasia with the big python?
Yeah, beat me to it. I like snakes. I always wanted one, but my ex wouldn't allow me to. Now I should just go and get one.
I had several. Yeah. I used to have a lot of snakes as a kid.
I don't know if my cat would approve. I'm not sure.
Isn't
Probably
that like
not.
Isn't that a thing in an episode of Friends though, where like Chandler's recently been broken up with, and like he's talking about, I'm gonna go out and buy a lot of snakes. Yeah, I'm gonna be crazy snake man.
Sorry, it is.
So there's John. You're inadvertently transforming into Chandler Bing over here.
I see no problem with that. He's one of the least problematic ones these days, isn't he?
Oh, maybe. Well, I don't know.
I'd have to comb through.
I think if you start poking that bear.
I mean, people have a problem with Ross. People have a problem with Monica. There's plenty of problems with Rachel as well. So I don't know. Maybe people have problems with Phoebe even. Joey. The whole show now it doesn't hold up. Really.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
this movie will outlast Friends. That's I'm just mark my words.
It will. It's going to outlast a lot of stuff. It's going to outlast The Usual Suspects because you can't talk about Kevin Spacey, but you can talk about this film.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. No, nothing comes out about anyone involved in this film.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's got plenty of dirt, but he just owns up to it, so nobody cares.
Yeah. But this is a great classic horror stuff though of her sinking into the ground.
Yeah.
Like this is it's one of those. It's crazy. It's cartoony because of the massive, weird, eerie green glow that's coming behind her and stuff. I actually, for personal headcanon, I'm going to say that that's actually an allusion to The Green, which is a DC Comics thing where it's basically like another dimension where that psychically links all plant life on Earth. It's a big thing in the Alan Moore Swamp Thing run. Actually, why Jason Woodrue is eating bits of Swamp Thing is because he wants to connect to the green and stuff. And later, comic editions, Poison Ivy is someone who can contact the green, and it's considered to be this very psychedelic, very trippy, very peaceful and ethereal sort of plane to visit. And for the ease off in this movie a little bit, I'm like, yeah, that's an allusion to the green. She is literally sinking into the green as this happens.
I like it.
Does that explain all the green lightning? Because I was trying to figure that out. Like, are there just a bunch of green windows at the top of this place so the lightning is transformed into green, or why is the lightning green?
It's just the last movie they had so much green with the Riddler, and they're like, we have all the same equipment. We'll just use all the same bulbs.
There you go. That makes sense.
Because they didn't want to waste money on this film.
No.
Got a penny
It's
pinch.
just like, so they were shutting down that movie. Joel Schumacher was like, no, keep it. Like, we never know when we might need like 15,000 green things again. So.
And maybe it was just considered the colour palette of the Schumacher sort of series of movies. Was like, well, you got to have green in there.
Well, and the pink light doesn't start coming in until later, but there's a lot of pink light in the back half of this movie. I seem to remember, like Mario
there's a
Baba
definite
pink.
shift.
Yeah.
And also the weird green underglow just really reminded me of Stephen King's The Tommyknockers as well. The whole thing, them digging up the spaceship under the woods and whatnot. I don't think
is this the same one I've seen? That like was it on Sci-Fi Channel?
Oh yeah, the Jimmy Smits version. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the currently the only version. But
is it the only one?
Of course, weirdly enough though. Tommyknockers is like, Stephen King will admit it's a complete ripoff of They Came From Beyond Space, which is a 60s British horror movie starring Michael Gough. So
I actually have a poster of that right behind me
Holy
as
moly.
we speak.
Oh,
yeah,
there you go.
with the aliens in the cat suits. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Amazing.
Not cat like animal, but in the
Yeah.
Selena Kyle kind of cat suits.
But the Michael Gough is the Master of the Moon in that movie, wearing a giant.
What a title!
Yeah, wearing a giant pink cape. So that's a beautiful. Everything's connected to the fact that unexpectedly the guests would have that right behind them as well.
Yep.
That's made my day.
That's one of those posters that is such an amazing poster that you know that the movie cannot possibly be this good.
Yeah, in some ways, I now don't want to watch the film.
Yeah.
It won't live up to that poster.
I tried to watch it and turned it off because I was like, oh no, it can't even be close. This is sad.
I'll tell you what, though, that's one thing I do miss about VHS and DVDs and everything, because these days it's very rare I'll go to a shop and actually look through. I used to spend like 3 hours looking through the movies, and I would just sometimes pick some based on the artwork, and you'd find an occasional gem that you'd never heard of, and you just picked it because you're like, this looks incredible, and sometimes it would be.
No, this is so many though, as Mitch is alluding to as well, where you're just like, the movie's never going to live up to this.
Yeah.
Like even like the Jason Goes to Hell poster with like all the flames behind him and the metal hockey mask and this big weird.
Yeah, none of that.
Yeah, like that's not in the film. You're like, oh, come on.
Well, that was always my favorite thing. It especially happened with VHS. Was that they would make artwork and stuff for the cover that had no relation to the movie, and they had no intention of making it represent the film. It was to sell you a piece of crap.
Oh yeah. It's like hiring very talented people to sell awful things. So
usually hand painted as well for some reason.
Yeah, those were the days.
But the thing I also really love here, I think this is like beautiful pieces of imagery to evoke the origin of Poison Ivy. As much as like I think last movie I said when they introduced Two-Face, there's virtually no better way to introduce Two-Face in terms of his first appearance on screen as having the bat signal and then the coin flip up in front of it.
Yeah,
that's just it's too good.
Yeah.
And then this image of her, like the arm, but the ivy wrapped around it. This is like, oh, that's fantastic. Like that's
it's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's I'm staying tuned. I want to see what's going to happen next. That's for sure.
But I kind of get like it's almost like it's a reverse Carrie kind of thing, because obviously you have the hand coming out of the grave,
yeah,
and this is like the hand going into the grave. But
it's funny you mentioned that. One of the greatest theater experiences that I ever had in my life was seeing Carrie
Was it the
upon
musical?
its initial release in the theater. No, the Brian De Palma movie.
Oh, okay. I thought for some reason my
and
mind went to instantly to must be the musical.
No, not the musical. I'm old. And a completely packed theater, and it was dead of winter, so the place was probably too warm, and there were too many people in there, and everybody, had come in from the cold, and their coats were everywhere. So there's and the temperature kind of went up as soon as they were naked in the locker room, and it never went back down. And that hand comes out at the end, and they were peeling people off of the ceiling. It was amazing. People just shrieked and came up out of their seats.
But one thing, though, talking about this arm sticking up out of the ground with the ivy wrapped around it, I know you at least appreciate, John, really reminded me of Hannibal as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because they have that one. But did you watch the Hannibal TV show?
Oh,
Mitch?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, I did.
It's a masterpiece.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's just, I was so sad they weren't going to do another season. I was really looking forward to it.
And they keep getting my hopes up. Like, you keep getting Mads Mikkelsen, and it'll be like, a headline going, Mads Mikkelsen teases season 4. It's like, don't do this to me.
Yeah, that's brutal. Please don't, because that would be so cool.
It is just the Hawkeye and Endgame meme of like, don't do this. Don't give me hope.
Yeah.
So it makes you think of the bodies that were being covered with all the mushrooms and everything.
Yeah. That's one of those things of like if Matt Reeves ends up doing a sequel, that's almost like an ideal version of Poison Ivy right there. It's like, she kills men and then she uses their body to grow, flora in some way. And it's like, it's right there for you, man.
I could see that actually fitting as well. That would work for Batman.
Oh, 100%.
She would have a body farm. You know, have you heard about those? It's really gross. Just Google body farm and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But but it really does. Like it's a perfect visual. Here leads to a perfect potential revamp for Poison Ivy in future movies. So yeah, kudos to, again, it's one of those things like as one of the worst movies ever made. So many things in individual minutes where you're like, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, let's just put that. Can we put that to rest? Can we just say that without a doubt, this is not one of the worst movies ever made? You can say a lot of things about it, but I don't think that deserves to be said about this movie. I'd prefer it might not even be a movie. I'll just do that.
Although that's one of the things, though, Mitch, because of its reputation, we are asking guests what the worst movie they ever have seen themselves is. Do you know one off the top of your head, or?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's the worst movie, but it's the movie that I hate, probably, with a passion. I have a couple of them. Weirdly enough, both written by Paul Haggis.
No.
I think that movie Crash, not the David Cronenberg Crash, that movie Crash that won the Academy Awards is one of the worst movies ever made. And I think that $1 Million Baby is a close second to another one of the worst movies ever made.
I like your choices. I like those. They're interesting.
See, we're usually getting a lot of things like Highlander 2, but I was like, oh no, Mitch Brian's coming. He's coming for the prestige movies.
Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna I mean Highlander 2 is, we don't want to be that mean to Highlander 2. It's trying really hard. It's just doing it in a very strange way.
Well, here's actually a question that I think we should start asking guests, because we're going along, is Batman and Robin, despite its reputation, does get a lot of love from some people. Is there a movie you would think of that is widely regarded as being bad that you personally love?
Oh yeah, well, I'm always a big defender of Zardoz.
Oh yeah,
yes.
I love Zardoz. I love everything about it, all of its flaws and everything. I just love it.
Oh.
That's the thing. That's an interesting choice of words. Flaws, right? I think it might be a modern thing. I sound old again. I'm not old. People don't seem to accept flaws in a movie. It's like it's got to be perfect or it's crap.
Yeah, there was a great quote from Stephen King where he was talking about how they want everything all round and smooth and perfect. And he's like, that's not going to scare anybody. That's not going to shake anybody up. It's those movies that have those incredibly outrageous moves that rock you. And I mean, not to put this in that category, but one of my probably top 10 favorite movies is Ken Russell's film of The Devils. And it's not a perfect movie, but it ain't round and smooth. And it's so full of amazing choices. Most of Ken Russell's movies, even the ones that are less successful, he was not about making anything round and smooth,
Well, I always like when a director gets to kind of have maybe not total free reign, but a lot of leeway with what they can do. Because
Yeah.
even if it doesn't work, I'm fascinated in knowing that this is their vision. This is what they wanted to make. It's their art.
Yeah,
people
John Borman comes off of this huge hit with Deliverance, and it's like, you can do whatever you want to do. It's like, I'm going to make Zardoz. It's like, good for you.
So even if you don't think it's good, isn't that fascinating?
No,
That's
it's-
great.
Yeah, and you know, to Schumacher's credit, and I dislike many of his movies. I really dislike Falling Down, and I hate St. Elmo's Fire.
Oh,
but
yeah.
like, you know,
I get
he
that.
does go off and make Tigerland and some pretty, you know, okay, go for it. You know,
Yeah,
interesting choice.
I'm just happy. Like, how many? We're like 6 or 7 weeks in now, and there's not been one repeat of the
No.
worst movies yet. So it's like, yeah, we're getting an eclectic bunch here. I don't know if John, we end up having to like cover some of these on like the Patreon or something.
Let's
but-
do it. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
do like
And
an
I know
annual or a monthly vote on the page or something.
Well, one last thing in this minute before we wrap things up is there's one more amazing line. We get fellow maniacs. Bidding begins. And not only is it a great line, but he admits that he's a maniac. Like,
Yeah.
he knows. At least he's honest.
I think it was very much the rejection of Pamela. Her calling him a psycho was just like, well, that's a given. But you know,
Yeah.
Maybe that was the turn. Maybe he had a moment of revelation.
I am a psycho.
Yeah.
Look at all these other people in the other room going, what the hell is going on in there? And also,
What happened to him?
Is he coming back?
his fellow maniacs is like, I'm a politician, sir. But then some people will be like, same difference. So
I like the thought as well that none of those people know each other. They only know him. So you know, like when you go out, you're with friends, and it's awkward because the one person you have in common leaves.
yeah.
To like go to the bathroom, and you're just sat there with this person you don't know. Like,
It's like,
Hey.
how did you meet Jason Woodrue?
yeah.
He was a college professor.
It's such an awkward. It always happens. You go to the pub with someone, and like, oh, you bump into their random friend they know from work. Come and sit with us. It's like, oh no, don't. Do
Yeah,
that. No,
yeah.
no.
But yeah, I think I'm noted out for 21 here, unless anyone has anything else to bring up about this particular minute.
That's all I've got. What a great line to go out on.
Yeah.
Do you have any parting shots about the movie in general? I think you've said your piece mostly throughout, but you might have one or two things you didn't get to say.
I have two questions about the stuff that you guys may have already talked about leading up to this.
Okay.
These are my two parting shots. One is the Batmobile with those fins is completely bonkers, and it kind of, again, Stephen King comes to mind, you know, where he was saying, I don't agree with him, but his problem with The Shining was it's like this car that has these amazing fins on it, but it won't run. And I just like, those fins are just nuts. And the other thing that I would love to know is who has that prop of Robin encased in ice, that full-size thing. I mean, I'm sure some Robin fetishist bought it at an auction or something, and it has it up on a shrine. But that thing, that is amazing. I would love to have that in my backyard.
We've speculated the same thing. We don't know who's got it. We couldn't find any
It seems-
information.
It's got to be like,
Really?
like a Planet Hollywood or something. Like, it feels like the fact that you can't find it. You can find like old Robin suits. You can find other frozen people from the movie, like the Freeze Goon and stuff like that. But yeah, that Robin, I can't track it. Like, it's, you know, kind of sort of, maybe Chris O'Donnell took it, but then
I would if I was him.
yeah, but
Yeah,
he's
maybe.
complained about the fact that like he took the Robin suit from Batman Forever, and he's like, oh yeah, I have to haul it around everywhere now. Like when I move house, it's a pain in the ass. And it's like, so I don't know if he would have taken it, but like, yeah, it is for something as beautiful as that. It really
it's
is
incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. Look
Yeah,
at
it's an astonishingly good prop. Like, I don't know what could have happened to it. Nobody has any info. It's really upsetting. And well, on that, we will head off into the dark night. Mitch, one more time, would you like to tell people where you and your shows can be found online?
Yes, you can find us at Alien Minute or 007 by 7.
Hey, give them a listen, everybody, because if you haven't already, you're missing out. Definitely, because everything you do is one of the best, because you actually know what you're talking about from a filmmaking standpoint. Whereas, as good as all these shows are, we don't have a lot of people with that angle. There's only
Well, thank you for saying that. That's really nice.
well, that's what brings something a bit different and a bit more interesting to it. Because I love all of these shows, but your work on Alien, which is I keep going on about it because I love that show so much, is you go really into the nitty gritty of making the movie, and I think that's an approach that Alien needed. Because it could be me and Niall joking about Alien, but it deserves more than that.
I'd also just before you go, Mitch, it's like thank you for your work on the Batman animated series. It was, formidable TV show for me growing up. Absolutely adored that show. Still love it to this day. And obviously you contributed quite a bit to it. So thanks for doing that.
Well, thanks for saying that. I'm really proud to have been one little piece of that amazing endeavor.
Oh, and amazing it is. I'm sure you've all watched multiple episodes. Go watch more. At one point, we're going to cover some more episodes on the Patreon as well. Speaking of the Patreon, go and subscribe to it. Come to TeePublic. Look us up there, Sleepy Charlie Media. Buy a T-shirt or a pillow or a coffee cup. I can't remember what else you can get. There's a laptop case or something. I don't know. Stickers, all kinds of crap.
A tent. Can you get a tent?
Probably. Face masks, all kinds of stuff. And Facebook's the main place to speak to us anyway, the Bat-Minute Listeners Cave. We'll be back on Monday with a new guest and more Bat-Minute and Robin.
Next week, accident chilled the video star? A Teen Titans' talons get toasty at our heroes' HQ as they watch footage of a fall into molecular modifying goo. There's new info on show about their Sub-Zero foe, but will this intel make them think twice about their Arctic enemy's heart of ice? It's a tale as cold as time next week. Batmite's same Batpod, different Bat-Minute.
We'll be back.